Good morning, Delaware. My heck, you're almost through with this lovely course, huh? My name's Marlon Winger. Today I'll be teaching the strategizing and implementing a soil health management system talk. Just wanted to introduce myself quickly. I'm a soil health specialist for NRCS. My region of coverage is Wyoming, Montana, Idaho, and I'm acting for Utah. I grew up on a small dairy farm in southeastern Idaho. All I was going to do with the rest of my life was buy a new pair of rubber boots and buy 50 cows and farm with my dad. But that didn't work out. We lost the farm in the mid 80s. I went to school at Utah State University, got a bachelor's and master's degree there in agronomy with a weed science emphasis. Worked as a county extension agent for about 7 or 8 years. Then I went to NRCS as a area agronomist in northern Utah, and then worked in Boise, Idaho as a state agronomist, and currently I'm in the position I am now. So with that awesome introduction, my screen should be shared, so we'll go on. So today I'll be talking about strategizing and implementing a soil health management system. This slide on the left, the picture on the left is kind of what it's all about. Examples of implementing systems in implementing principles of soil health in cropping systems. A few objectives today is to identify key components of practices and activities to develop soil health management systems, describe the interaction, dependency, and synergy between practices and soil health management systems, recognize a few barriers to implementation, and you'll see quite a few examples of entry-level strategies in developing a soil health management system. Management systems are a collection of NRCS conservation practices. They could be best management practices or activities that focus on maintaining or enhancing the function of our soil. The key is to address all four of the soil health principles. Now, I'll tell you a little dirty secret. When you start working with producers, sometimes they'll be hesitant to jump in with both feet. Generally, only the innovators that you'll hear about in our next talk jump in with both feet. But sometimes it takes a couple of years to get all the principles implemented. We're trying to create a synergistic effect, because the more principles you start putting together for the producer and the producer implements them, the more power the system has. But if you just do one principle that you've been taught this week, there's not much of a synergistic effect. You just don't see the boom. So let's talk about best accepted technology. Some of these are examples of best technology, but they're not national practices yet. They may be companion cropping, they may be traffic management, precision application of nutrients or pesticides, use of flotation tires, for example. So these can all be used in management systems. Achieving soil health through quality no-till or strip-till. Now, one of our challenges is a guy will no-till corn into soybean residue because that's easy, but he won't go the other way. And so you're not getting that synergistic effect. We need to plan for diverse and strategic cover crops, which you've had that module today. We can work harder through adapting nutrient and pest management and integrate those into our new soil health management system. I think one of the biggest challenges in modern farming today is the diversity of crop rotations. And sometimes in our regions that we live in, we're just stuck in a system. In the Intermountain West, we're often stuck in a wheat fallow system, so it can be technically challenging. We can achieve soil health management systems through precision farming techniques and prescriptive buffers. You guys have kind of heard this quote maybe this week, but soil health is not a destination. You don't get there. You're always trying to improve. It's a journey. You should be learning to increase your activities like increasing soil organic matter and increasing infiltration. It's never a destination. effects of tillage on microbial activity. I think you guys have seen this possibly. So I'm in the presentation this week, so I'm not going to highlight it too much. The conventional tillage system has a huge spike when tillage begins early in the season. And when you get that rapid microbial activity, or microbial respiration is what's being measured on the y-axis, you'll get a lot of nitrogen released into the ecosystem, and that nitrogen eventually ends up as nitrate, right? And it can be quickly lost in some situations. Well, what we're after is trying to emulate Mother Nature as best we can. And the green line represents a no-till soil health management system where respiration may be slower in the springtime, noticeably slower. But notice when the blue line, let me go back a slide, when the blue line starts dying out because it ate all the easy to eat food source and all the microbes were activated at the same time, now the blue line is out of energy. Right when the plant needs another boost of nitrogen for rapid growth, grain fill, etc. So this no-till system actually, in my opinion, represents what we're trying to shoot for as emulating Mother Nature. Which tillage system has more microbial activity? I believe the no-till system does. Although the blue line, blue conventional till certainly does have a big spike, but oftentimes we don't need that big spike of nitrogen release early in our growing season. But the weeds, think about this, the annual weeds like red root pigweed, lamb's quarter, kochia, whatever you may have, annual grasses, boy, they sure love that nice spurt of nitrogen, but our crops generally don't need it. In soil health management systems, sometimes producers don't realize there's a need for it. And so sometimes that's where this in-field soil health assessment can take place. This is my now retired colleague, Ray Archuleta, come up with this quote somewhere. He said, "These fields are naked, hungry, thirsty, and running a fever." In our old presentations, we used to talk a little bit more about that, but naked, hungry, thirsty, and running a fever. These are all slides in Idaho. Here's a couple pictures of what happens to naked, hungry, thirsty, running a fever type fields. Logan, Utah, we have white knobs. And so those white knobs, the soil has eroded away. We've lost that. Production on a field like that, on those white knobs, may be less than 10 bushel to the acre, when normal production could be 40 or 50 bushels per acre on dry land. Aberdeen, Idaho, good thing our soil's not black or you wouldn't be able to drive through it. Good thing it's brown so that you can drive through it, but the newspaper always talks about fugitive dust. Blackfoot, Idaho, has a 3-wire fence. The bottom 2 wires are buried with snow. This is an old slide, but I love it because it helps me understand soil health management systems. Dr. Don Rakowski teaches us that the more we till, the black line moldboard plow, the more carbon as CO2 we lose in the field. In fact, in hour 5, he hits the plowed field with a tandem disc and gets a pretty significant little bump. Blue line represents a disc ripper, but the red line is what we're after, guys. Look at the low amount of CO2. Now you're going to lose some because you're always going to have microbial respiration occurring, but look at that red line, how it's very minimal, minimizing the amount of loss. So Dr. Don Rakowski. The internet, YouTube is full nowadays of innovators in all of the states in America. These are some examples of some Idaho back in our early days of efforts we made because we knew that our colleagues, our farmer partners needed to hear other presentations. So you've seen these soil health principles. In the West, we integrate a lot of livestock into our system, and we lump that integrating livestock into maximizing biodiversity. So I'm going to start giving some examples of soil health management systems. When we started back in the day in Idaho, we realized that we could go out and teach all these workshops, guys, but the farmers didn't have a drill. And so we worked with a lot of conservation districts to cost share or to lease drills out. And this is an example of the Ada Conservation District. Their first year, they only rented out 1,000 acres of the drill, and they were a little discouraged. The second year, they rented out 6,000 acres of the drill, and a lot of the ground was flood irrigated. And they said, "Oh, we can't. It won't. No-till will never work in flood irrigated ground." The top right picture is a picture of one of the conservation district board chairman's trying it out on his farm. We learned to adapt and adopt practices. We changed up our row corrugators. We used potato vine splitters. We call them potato vine splicers, with a roller packer and then shovels for our flood irrigation. Here's an example of, these are some video clips that I took out. This is an innovator trying it for the first time. So he rented the drill. He actually drove it about 75 or 80 miles from one county to his farm. And this is a video that's not going to play, of course, but it's a disc drill going through 250 bushel grain corn residue. So here's the back end of the drill, showing the drill just went through the corn residue. It's amazing, these technologies. Now, this was the first time they've ever no-tilled, so they only experimented on I can't remember, to be honest with you, 80 acre, 60 acre field. The next year, the state agronomist that's in Idaho sent me this picture. That's his winter wheat coming up in flood irrigated residue. So think about this in our next talk when we talk about social and economics. How many tillage passes did this guy save? Now, the only practice that he did on this farm was no-till, but it's kind of that stepping point for him as a producer. Here's another example of no-tilling winter wheat into corn silage residue. Think about this, all the tillage work that occurs after a corn silage harvest. So notice also in Idaho, one thing we learned was we started drilling our no-till drills in flood irrigated ground on about a 10-15 degree angle, so that the discs sliced and diced through the bed, so they cut a slit through the bed. This is an interesting one. This is the previous crop was pinto beans. They broadcasted winter wheat as a cover crop, so it was a late seeded cover crop. So the winter wheat didn't grow very much. Now this right in the left center of the picture is not the best part, but you can see better winter wheat cover crop come. And then they strip tilled, planted Roundup Ready alfalfa for seed production. So the alfalfa looks pretty thin, but that's how they grow seed production. So now they're planting cover crops, they're minimizing soil disturbance, they're adding a little diversity to the crop rotation. You guys probably can't see this very well, but look at the smile on the producer's face. Now that's when you know, as a conservationist, you're making a difference, when you get them to crack a smile standing in front of their strip till unit with the planter on the attached. This is an example of a regeneration of an old pasture. They had to do a little land planing, took it out of corral, so they had some disturbance, but they planted a warm season cover crop mix with a few cool seasons in the understory. Planted it July 25th. This is 105 degrees in Boise, Idaho. Scared me to death. I didn't know if these cool season species could survive the heat of 105 degrees, but they do, because they have a canopy that grows up above them. So these two neighbor friends, went to the national no-till on the plains meetings, and they went in January and came back and had bought him a Great Plains drill, and planted 1,200 acres of corn silage into no-till triticale stubble their first year. Here's a picture of the video that shows them planting into this residue here. So here's the dead residue. They didn't roll it. They just planted it. It was only about belt high. And here's a picture, October 31st. I think they'd planted that. September 18th is when the drill was going through. So there's the fall triticale silage crop being planted into that dead into that dead cover crop residue. This is what they normally do on the 1,200 acres of farm ground. They plant a fall triticale. Springtime comes about the middle to end of May 20th maybe. Then they'll silage that triticale. It's in the boot stage, about knee high, pretty high quality feed. They put it in a different silage pit for their dry cows, and then they use their no-till drill and plant a twin row of corn silage with that Great Plains drill. Then you'll notice right in the center of the field, you'll see this triticale that's kind of an off color. That's the triticale that regrew after it was swathed. So at the appropriate time, then they'll come in and hit it with a non-selective herbicide to terminate it. The corn is a GMO corn, so it is resistant to the glyphosate spray. The cool thing about this picture is here's a producer implementing no-till, minimizing disturbance, keeping the soil covered. Now, one thing he is lacking is maximizing diversity because he hasn't added anything to it. But he's got a living root nearly 365 days a year because he's planting corn right into that green triticale once it's been chopped. So not honestly 365, but pretty close to it. Here's another example of minimizing soil disturbance. In the West, we often teach our producers to no-till into the easiest part of the crop rotation, and that generally is taking alfalfa. So if your alfalfa field has been in for 5 or 7 years, however many years, many of our farmers have learned to spray out their alfalfa with a herbicide, cut it, swath it, bale it, haul it off, and the next week after they haul it off, they're ready to plant winter wheat. And this is a field of winter wheat that the farmer said went 156 bushel to the acre with no tillage and reduced nitrogen application because they're going right into an alfalfa part of the rotation. Here's an example of sugar beets. Now, I don't know how many sugar beets are grown in Delaware, but that's not the concept. The concept is, look how different people are implementing these principles into systems. I'm going to try to read this quote from one of the best soil health senior crop consultants from the Amalgamated Sugar Company. He said in 2014, 60% of all growers in his district were using strip till on 3,400 acres, with 36% of those acres strip tilled into established alfalfa. In 2015, look how fast this is going. 90% of all growers in the Owyhee district were using strip till, no-till, or cover crops on at least part or all of their beet acres. 2016, estimated all but one grower is using a combination of strip till, no-till, or cover crops on on part or all of their sugar beet acres. So that's pretty cool when you get industry starting to push soil health management systems, because it's a win-win for everybody. It's win for the farmer, it's win for the soil ecosystem, it's a win for the sugar company. The sugar beet company figured out that highest beet yields often follow alfalfa in the rotation. But here's the trick: when considering beets following alfalfa on flood irrigated ground, make your alfalfa beds on 22-inch centers, so that you are planning ahead for your next crop, for your next beet crop. I love this quote from Jill Clapperton. She says, "The more diverse the community, the more extensive will be its services, right? We all can't be firefighters, and the same thing with our soil ecosystem. The more diverse the system is, the more extensive will be its services. Principle 2, maximizing soil cover. Now, I'm trying to change my vocabulary a little bit from just calling it cover or calling it residue. I like to think about it as armor because it's an active word. It's protection. It's very active. It's not a knight in a rag cloth. It's not a knight in shining in tinfoil. It's a knight in shining armor. So, armor will help reduce soil erosion. A quote from Dr. Dwayne Beck: "Boys, you got to learn to take E out of ET." That, of course, means take evaporation out of the evapotranspiration equation. Dr. Beck says you can't make any money on evaporation. So if you're going to lose water from the soil, and you will, let's learn to lose it through transpiration, because that'll make you some return on investment. Of course, armor or soil cover helps to moderate the temperatures from being too low to too high. So it moderates temperature from highs and lows. Water droplet energy is dissipated, and of course it can reduce sunlight to the weed seeds. Does anybody speak Spanish in the group? Arena, and I don't speak Spanish either, but arena means sand. So Sand Valley, Idaho. This is blow sand like in your kids' sandbox. But they've learned to, Simplot has learned to require their people that rent their land during the sugar beet year, in this example, is after potato harvest, they have to plant a cover crop. In this case, it's winter wheat. The winter wheat grew up 10 or 12 inches tall. They strip tilled the sugar beets in one pass. They let the winter wheat grow for just a little longer to give it more wind protection. And then they sprayed a glyphosate product over the sugar beets, killed the wheat, any weeds, and they got a pretty good crop growing in Sand Valley, Idaho. Nationwide, we're pretty familiar with biofumigation of white mustards, oriental mustards, or Pacific gold. So after winter wheat harvest, producers would plant 1 or 2 of these mustards, irrigate it, fertilize it, grow some pretty good biomass. But then in order to make the biofumigant work, they got to shred it and disc it a couple times and get that plant material into the ground to release that glucosinolate that then breaks down into a fumigant to kill pest nematodes. The challenge with biofumigation is it kills everything in the soil, right? Fumigation is not selective. So I met up with Simplot Simplot consultants, and on the right side, Kent Wittig from Allied Seed, and Kent taught us a little bit about working with cover crops as trap crops. So they don't plow them into the ground anymore. They let the trap crop emit exudates into the soil, which wakes up the sugar beet cyst nematode. The nematode hatches, attaches and feeds on one of these radish species in this picture, and 2 things happen. Either the females, because they think of some nutritional problem in the plant, the females don't survive, or the other thing is all the nematodes turn into males and they can't reproduce or complete their life cycle. So we've developed several cover crop mixes with Allied Seed that are nematode resistant. And so we've done some field days with other seed companies. They called this the Equip Beet mix. It was an 8-way cover crop mix to control sugar beet cyst nematode. We've also done the same thing, developing nematode resistant cover crop mixes for potato, like the Columbia root knot nematode. So the more you grow the cover crop, the more nematodes it kills, and you don't have to incorporate them into the ground to get the biological control. And the cool thing is it only affects the bad nematodes. It doesn't fumigate all the other microorganisms in the soil. So pretty cool technology. Quite a few farmers are now experimenting with this. And the other thing is you can graze these cover crops because you don't got to till them into the ground to get that glucosinolate to break down into the soil. Here's another interesting one. It's a potato grower. In the newspaper, he said, wind erosion is a big problem for us here. That's why I went to no-till. Within a 35-acre quarter of the pivot, Parkinson cut his wheat short at harvest, leaving residue and a couple inches of stubble. After harvest, using his no-till grain drill, he direct seeded radishes into the stubble as a cover crop, planted solely for soil health benefits. So he called it no-till, but it's kind of a reduced till system. But he was able to take out spring disc, spring chisel plow, ripping during top dress, and spring mark out. He was able to eliminate those. Pretty significant because every one of those are big tillage passes. It's just not pulling a harrow. These are big operations. So on the left is the conventional side, on the right is the reduced till, and all during the growing season you couldn't see any really any visual differences. Here's what the ground looked like on the left, conventionally prepared potato ground. On the right, his radish that winter killed, and then he direct seeded right into that cover crop residue. Here's just a little economic results. Basically, there was no significance in the 100 weights of potatoes that come off the no-till or the conventional ground. There was a little bit of difference in the number one yield of potatoes. So he got 73% number ones. That's the big money maker in potato production versus 68%. So he down a little bit on the number twos because the number twos went to number ones. And of course, then the cheapest potato in the field, the processing potato, he was a little less. But the money's made in that number one potato quality. So I've worked with quite a few the potato industry. If you can find a harder group of people to work with, let me know. I gave several presentations to this group of potato growers in St. Anthony, Rexburg, Idaho area. They said, Marlon, we love your soil health message, but we don't know how to implement it. So it only takes one innovator, though. So this is Jaron Raybold. He says, Dad, we got one pivot. Let's try it. So after harvest, they planted the cover crop immediately after potato harvest. They got the cover crop on September 7th. The picture is 40 days after planting. So it's kind of amazing how quick a cover crop will come up late in the fall because the soil is already warm. And we had 100% ground cover the first year. We went out there the next spring, the cover crop winter killed. The DC here, his hair, you can see, is a mess. It's 35, 40 mile an hour wind blowing. My hair stayed perfect the whole day. But the cool thing is you can see across the field, we basically stopped erosion. So if I was live with you, we could have a little better chat. But the first year he planted one pivot. How many pivots did he plant the second pivot? How many pivots did he plant the second year? He planted 9 pivots the second year because he virtually stopped erosion in a potato wheat rotation. Here's the neighbor still eroding 75 tons of average annual soil loss per year. Zero, near zero, certainly less than 5 tons compared to his neighbor at 75 plus tons. That'll get your attention. So the other thing I didn't share with you is they were able to no-till the cover crop into that system. This slide is talking about strip till, which many of our producers migrated from conventional till, strip till, no-till. We didn't force them to go from conventionally till to no-till because it's a tough step. It's a big step. So many of our Idaho producers went to strip till. Here's a video that's not going to play of a strip till unit. So you can see discs, residue managers, a shank, roll closers, and seed firmers. And then on this particular operation, he's strip tilling and planting sugar beets all in one pass. Now you could do the same thing. You could be strip tilling corn, you could be strip tilling beans, you could be strip tilling cotton, strip tilling soybeans, etc. So in when we started back in the early days of soil health in the West, 8 strip till companies came to Burley, Idaho, and demonstrated their big 12-row, I think it's 12-row strip till units. And we had about 150 soil health innovative type producers there watching for the first time. And so it's called strip till, right? Because it strips, it tills an area and leaves a strip undisturbed. So is it a perfect system? No, but it's a stepping point for many producers. Here's I took this slide because this was the first strip till field in Aberdeen, Idaho, in a little town. Normally these fields are completely tilled and pulverized and the wind is blowing and erosion is crazy. But I stopped and took this because it looks like a mess from your pickup truck driving down the road. But those little teeny sugar beets are protected from that wind blasting effect of soil erosion. Here's a 2-pass vertical system after grain corn harvest. This is big time grain corn. This is 275 bushel grain corn harvest. They may graze the corn stalks a little bit in the wintertime, take the easy stuff off. And then springtime comes, they use a turbo till. I'm telling you, which is not the perfect scenario, but can you see how this is a stepping point? So they use a turbo till vertical disc system, and then they strip till sugar beets into that corn silage residue. And this was on a little field day we had with the sugar beet consultant. Another sugar beet consultant in another part of Burley, Idaho, near Hazleton, said, "Marlon, let's go look at the best pinto bean crop in the state of Idaho, or in the county that we were driving in." And so here, I didn't know it, but he pulled into a strip tilled pinto bean field, strip tilled into winter wheat residue, and boy, did it look good. So some new technology. So producers learn to no-till or strip till one crop at a time in these diverse cropping systems. Also working with Brian Kuzman in Rupert, Idaho, trying to advance ourselves into learning how to no-till sugar beets, because we mastered strip till sugar beets. Now Brian's test plot is 2 pivots. This is how big the farm he works on. I think it's 2,500 acre irrigated farm. So we're walking in fields that were no-till sugar beets, and we're not going to play the link, but if you want, here's the YouTube link where we interview 11 different Idaho producers and how they're implementing soil health management systems. Stripper headers are becoming a new thing in the West. Now, some of our innovators, they've been doing this for a decade, but now it's ready to shift the curve so that more people are aware of stripper headers. Stripper headers here on the bottom right, they only pick off the seed head and leave the stubble standing, and so you have perfect residue management, right? Because 98% of the residue is left where it was living on the plant. So stripper headers, just for your information, Montana, we just developed an interim practice standard that includes stripper headers. So be looking for that. Organic growers, learning to use crimper rollers instead of tillage. I told this organic producer, a good friend of mine, "You're fighting against nature. We got to start learning to work with nature." He says, "Well, I can't spray. I'm an organic producer," because his benchmark condition would be till the ground, irrigate it, get seeds to germinate, till the weeds, irrigate again, and get 3 or 4 flushes of weeds before he could ever go in and plant a crop. And so I says, let's start working with nature. And we work with nature by planting a hairy vetch cover crop for nitrogen. He rolls it down and then transplants his warm season melons or cucumbers, whatever he's got in transplants into that heavy residue. I like the thought from this guy here. You guys have heard this thought probably before. We need to learn to work with instead of against our land. The third principle is maximizing diversity. Our native landscapes were once covered with abundant plant diversity, but our polyculture landscapes have been replaced by monoculture annuals. We need to learn to make rotations that are high and low water use, tap roots and fibrous roots, high and low carbon crops, legumes and non-legumes. That's how we can start to learn to maximize diversity. This bottom picture is in northeast Wyoming, where we got a cover crop guy on his fourth year, a producer planting cover crops. In his fourth year, he planted an 18-way cover crop mix, the most diverse cover crop mix I've ever seen, and we could count all 18 species in the mix. We should learn to include, whenever possible in our cropping systems, the 4 functional groups. If it's cover crops or if it's crop types: warm season grasses, warm season broadleafs, cool season broadleafs, or cool season grasses. Multi-species cover crops here and male sterile corn planted in the middle for grazing. This producer called me up on the left-hand side and said, "I love your cover crop mixes, but they're sure hell to get a hand line out of the cover crop mix." So he's swathing this one for hay. We don't see that very often. Most time they're grazed, but you can see peas and vetch and turnips and radishes and warm season grasses, and oats are nearly close to 6 feet tall in that picture. Brendan Rocky is a good example of improving diversity out of Alamosa, Colorado. He currently, last time I heard him speak, he's planting potatoes and cover crop, full season cover crop. That's his rotation. But now he's learning to plant peas, chickling vetch, buckwheat, and desi chickpeas right in with his potato row. Can you see that? What an example of adding diversity. Now, down the strip of his potato field, his pivot, he'll plant this list of flowering cover crop species. And then on the far right is his list of cover crops that's part of his cropping rotation. So potatoes, then this list of full season cover crops. And he's making as much money as he used to, within a percentage or two, because he's been able to reduce the inputs on his potato crop by the benefits of the cover crop system. Here's a picture of his top left is his multi-species cover crop in yellow, and buckwheat and other flowering cover crops. Now what he did learn to do is plant cover crops down the middle, and the next year or two, then he was able to plant cover crops around the outside of the pivots to enhance his agrisystem management. Mr. Rocky shares a paper in his talk about the soil health management systems from Dr. Altieri. This is how most of us were growing up in the bottom half of the graphic. But Brandon says, I want to learn to increase natural enemies and species diversity in his farm system. So Brandon's learning to use low disturbance tillage practices, maybe using some organic amendments. I know Brandon uses a little bit of compost with a little bit of fertilizer. He's certainly using cover crops. He has, I don't know, 15 species in his crop rotation now, where he used to only have 2, barley and potatoes. Now he has potatoes in a 15-way cover crop mix. So Brandon says we got to learn to make things live instead of just kill, kill, kill. This is a picture from Canada, Derek Axton, who used to be the #1. He says, I was the #1 Canadian producer that worked with nutrient management. And the story is that he cut his fertilizer bill from $300,000 a year to $26,000 a year. And one way he did that was interseeding. So he's got flax growing in one row and garbanzo beans or chickpeas, what we call them, in the other row. So it's a legume and a non-legume. Pretty impressive. So we took that idea to Idaho. Here's a few more pictures of Derek's farm. This is what the seeds come out of the combine. So you got peas and canola or peas and mustard in the bin, and so you can separate them once you're ready to sell the mix. One of the interesting things is all intercrops never receive a fungicide. So you can see Derek, he's doing all of the principles of soil health here. So look at the diversity of crops Derek has: wheat, barley, rye, canola, mustard, flax, lentils, chickpeas. So just pretty impressive. So we copied that and did it in southeastern Idaho. We did a little different. We went 2 rows of flax, 2 rows of chickpeas. We also tried mustard, and in this picture, the mustard crop, ketchup and mustard type mustard, doesn't look very impressive, but underneath the canopy of that mustard plant is a lentil crop. We've also had guys in southeastern Idaho try a new crop called parley. And I says, what the heck? There's no crop named parley. He says, yes, there is. It's a mix. It's a crop mix of pea and barley. Now, some of our guys in the West, because we've had some serious droughts the last couple of years, they're putting more thought of putting this type of system in their cropping rotation, because if it doesn't make it because of drought, they can at least cut it for hay and sell it to the beef cattle industry for hay. So it's intercropping, pretty cool system, and you're seeing this start to develop a little bit in regions of the U.S. How does it work? We don't know how it works, but for 100 years we've told producers that plants can only absorb inorganic forms of nitrate, ammonium and NH4 ammonia and nitrate. I got that mixed up. We told producers that plants could only absorb inorganic forms of nitrogen, ammonium, and nitrate. Dr. Amaranthus from University of California, Irvine, took some pictures of quantum dots that were attached to amino acids. Now, quantum dot is some sort of semiconductor attached to the amino acid. Then he could take pictures with an electron microscope and see the amino acid or the quantum dot attached to that mycorrhizal fungus. On the picture on the left, on the right is the mycorrhizal fungus transporting that amino acid right into the plant root. So pretty cool how we're starting to learn how plants really can function. Maximizing continuous living roots. You guys have seen this slide or a version of it, but we know that cover crops can play a big role in our soil health management systems. And I'm not going to belabor the point, but we know that these cover crops can help our system build aggregates, which build pore space, which leads to better water infiltration. Cover crops can armor the soil, drastically reduce soil erosion, moderate temperature, and reduce rainfall compaction. Here's a few sections on keeping living roots in the soil as much as possible. So we've seen a little bit of these pictures with cover crops in sugar beet rotations. I remember back in the day when we grew cover crops, and we were all about, look at how big of a turnip, look how big of the turnip we could produce, and look how big of that radish. These guys these are 2 district conservationists that are now retired, but look at the smile on their face, guys. They finally realized that soil health started bringing them passion back into their normal run-of-the-mill contracting NRCS life. It really brought passion back into our state. When we started with cover crops, continuous living root, we started doing cover crop test plots, and many of you guys have probably done this. This year, this picture represents, we did 8 cover crop individual species and 2 mixes, and they sucked. I'm telling you, the crimson clover overwintered. The above ground biomass only produced 150 pounds of above ground biomass. We dug them out and we saw this big root system, but we didn't know what we were looking at back in the day. It was just full of soil sticking onto that roots. And we weren't realize we were looking at the rhizosphere, right? So sometimes you don't think you have a very big impact, well, but you got to start somewhere. Gabe Brown says, if you do nothing, you still have nothing. One of my professional heroes, Gabe Brown, says he's planted nearly 100 different cover crops on his farm in North Dakota. Some years in a multi-species cover crop, because of some cold weather in the Intermountain West, maybe we don't get the best cover crop, but at least we got something growing, and we're learning as we go. Here's a picture of a radish. It only grew 3 or 4 inches above ground, so it looked like a kind of a biological planting disaster from the road. But when you start looking at the biopore that radish is making, busting compaction on the left-hand side, hey, maybe things are working if we keep trying and keep at it. I think this is why it's a journey, because it's not a destination, because we'll fail. This is kind of an example of a failure, but we fell forward in our efforts. This is an example of the DC in Rexburg, Idaho. Back in the day, the farmer, Sid Hanks, planted cover crops right after potato harvest on half the pivot. He had a different variety of potatoes. They were harvested later, and so the cover crop wasn't planted until September 28th. But he told us, Marlon and Ken, my farm will never blow. Grandpa and Dad let it blow for decades and decades. And so this was an innovative DC that got soil health systems going in his county. Back in the early days, we could count these on our hands. 3 no-till drills were purchased that year. 8 producers no-tilled cover crops into grain stubble. It was so small we could count them back in the day. 3,700 acres that year were planted to cover crops through EQIP, and another estimated 1,000 acres on their own. So this next slide kind of shows what we've been doing in Idaho over the last decade or so. I went to meet a guy named Gabe Brown and Ray Archuleta 2011 in North Dakota, and it shows kind of our 3 big practices. 329, which is kind of at the bottom of the graph, and in 2014 looks like 0 no-till acres, but it's really 314 acres. Guess what? So in 2018 was a year when we had Gabe Brown from North Dakota speak to 300 producers in Burley, Idaho. Look at the next year. Whew, we had 45,000 acres, almost 47,000 acres of cover crops planted. And then programs got nervous and capped our soil health practices. So we still had a lot of individual producers, but the acres were limited because programs capped it. They didn't want to let soil health get going too fast. It's kind of an interesting trend. Shows how soil health is slowly improving over the years. Back in 2013, this is a lot of years ago. This is a guy after wheat harvest planted cover crops. Didn't do it. He did some tillage, had quite a bit of residue on the soil surface, but this is what his radish on the left, turnip, Austrian winter pea or some sort of pea, crimson clover, and then hairy vetch on the insert pictures there. And I didn't clip the warm season grasses or the cool season grasses because we were so interested about how big our radishes and turnips got. The next section I want to talk about is livestock integration. Animals and plants and soils have synergistic roles together. However, in recent years, animals have been placed in confinement, and we all know the issues of large animal confinement. We can use livestock to balance our carbon and nitrogen ratios to convert high carbon to lower carbon and nitrogen ratios. We can use livestock to harvest additional sunlight and CO2. I like this statement. We can either bring feed to the feedlot or we can bring cattle to the feed. Here's a couple pictures of the McIntyre farms moving cattle multiple times a day. The cattle are all bunched up there ready to go because the farmer is getting ready to unhook he's there somewhere getting ready to open up the paddock into the next pasture. Look at this tight, apologize for this presentation. Here's McIntyre's grazing multi-species cover crop. I can't count how many cattle that is, but it looks like could be close to 80 to 100 head on an acre, and then they move it. So they're moving cattle multiple times a day in these cover crops. You can see in the background on the right, past the fence, they're leaving cover. They're leaving cover on the ground. Many of our innovative producers in Pocatello, Idaho, high elevation. This is top of the mountain in Pocatello, Idaho. This is a big farm operation. I don't know how big it is, 7,000 to 10,000 acres. But because the moisture is often limited in the West, after wheat harvest, we often don't have time. We don't have the moisture to put in a cover crop immediately. So many of our producers in the West are learning to insert cover crops into the crop rotation and then graze them, because a producer has to have some sort of return on investment. This is the same farm on the right. They had so many cover crops that year that their herd of cattle couldn't keep up with them. So they swath grazed the multi-species cover crop to stop termination. They didn't bale it. They just moved the electric fence and let them graze. Here's a group of us NRCS employees on the bottom left. This is teff in the mix, in a multi-species cover crop mix. The teff came a little too good. We should have cut the rate. Just for your information, teff has 1.3 million seeds per pound. We might have planted 1 pound to the acre of teff and it overwhelmed us. But look, it grew belt high. This is after wheat harvest, so this is probably in the month of early parts of October. Brad McIntyre, you've seen this drill. This was the first drill he bought. Drilled multi-species cover crop on August 10th. Began grazing on October 17th. We clipped in this plot 81 days after planting. We clipped 13,000 pounds of dry matter of multi-species cover crop. Look at the resiliency of this system. The warm season grasses here, the Sudan grass and millets, have froze, but the cool season grasses, they're saying, oh, we're fine. We're fine growing in cool temperatures. So this is the cool part of this system, is that they don't own cattle, so they don't have fences, but they put up electric fences around the pivots, and then they made their paddocks out of one wire, hot wire step-in tread posts. They put 300 cows on 3 acres for 1 day, and then moved the fence, moved the cattle to the next paddock. So we're walking up the field here because the producer moves them from that end of the field, and the cattle, as we moved, they moved closer to the gate. The next crop planted into this was grain corn. So here's a little closer picture of what the residue was left. So I believe that grazing these multi-species cover crops can be a win-win. They can be a win for the producer, a return on investment. They can cover the soil, and they can feed the soil biology below ground. So grazed versus not grazed for 1 day. This is the electric fence they set up. Just braided poly wire. Here's an example of the soil health 2-step. Now, if we were live in Delaware, I would teach you the soil health 2-step, but it's basically having manure patties and urine. So poop, poop, urine, urine. That's how the dance goes. So this is what we want. We want our fields covered with urine and poop. We don't want all the poop underneath the shade tree, right? Or around the water trough. This is what 300 cows on 3 acres for 1 day will do for you. The next year, Brad McIntyre called me and said, Marlon, you can't believe the earthworms under these cow pies. I says, oh, I've seen earthworms. Anyway, I finally made it out there. We dug up some soil, 1 cubic foot of soil underneath these cow pies, 165 earthworms per cubic foot. If you calculate that out, if that was under every square foot, that'd be 2.4 million earthworms per acre. Now, it's not that many because there wasn't a cow pie every square foot, but multiple cow pies in a square meter. You can't see this probably pretty well, but the soil, after 5 years of implementing soil health principles in his management system, it started going granular, folks. You don't see this very often, but I believe it's because for the first time they started applying all 5 of the soil health principles together, and this can be the effect. So if I ever come to Delaware, I'll buy steak dinners to anybody that shows me 150 earthworms in a cubic foot of soil. It's that impressive. That changed my paradigm this day when I counted those earthworms. For the first time in my life, I really believed that these soil health principles are good for the soil ecosystem, because that's a lot of work counting 165 earthworms in a cubic foot of soil. We learned with many of these producers, we can learn to improve organic matter through these systems. We can learn to increase the diversity of our rotations. We learned to take E out of ET. We learned to take T out of can't. We learned to improve our nutrient cycling. We've cut our fertilizer rates. Maybe not all the farmers have cut them all out, but we've significantly reduced our nitrogen and phosphorus inputs. There is no soil erosion in these systems. We are building soil. It's a restorative system. We're following all of the principles as much as we can. And most important, there is a return on investment on the practice. I'm a little nervous in NRCS when we have so many practices when there's not a return on investment. The negative component of the soil health comparison is sometimes your feelings get hurt, because people like me that spent my whole life in conventional agriculture, it's kind of a shock to your system when a lot of that stuff doesn't make sense anymore. Your feelings will get hurt a little bit. Of course, here we're teaching a producer workshop on the back of the pickup truck. Here's a little bit more of livestock integration and diversity. So this is a 80-acre pasture. You can see we're set up on multiple moves a day. I don't even remember how many moves. I think 6 moves a day. The cattle are just to the left out of the picture. But then they brought in 990 laying hens. Damn computer. 990 laying hens to peck the manure, and they're feeding them a little bit of grain, eating grass and legumes. You can see an alfalfa red clover component. They move the chickens with a mobile chicken coop. Now, in our soil health message, we don't talk too much about measuring soil health in these modules, but I just wanted to show you this picture here of the McIntyre brothers. Is this in a positive or a negative stance? This was not a staged photo. This was just a photo I took. This was a very much a negative, we got to wait, we got to think this through type discussion. This is with me and Ray Archuleta there. Anyway, back in 2013, we started soil health with this farm, but I want to look at 2 numbers. Organic carbon, this is run through the Haney test. It measures the size of the refrigerator in the house in the soil ecosystem. 202 the first year, 254 2 years later, 284 on the 4th year. We've learned in the West that when we hit about 300 parts per million organic carbon, water extractable organic carbon, you're finally getting somewhere. But this is how one of these fields, the earthworm field that I showed you, this is how it improved over a 4 or 5 year period of time. We can see through soil health testing that the system is working, but more important, I think, than the soil health testing is we can learn to read a shovel, and the shovel can tell us that the soil health system is working. This is last year, Brad McIntyre This is all the rage to plant 60-inch corn. Brad did a little uh, change to it. He planted 3 rows of grain corn on 30-inch centers. Then he skipped 2 rows and come back and planted a multi-species cover crop mix. This was such a jungle, we could only walk into the field about, I don't know, we made it about 30 feet just because it was a jungle. Brad told me the 3 rows of corn system yielded him 190 bushels per acre. And if I calculated it right, 40% of the crop of the field was planted into cover crops. So he would have easily hit his 275 bushel grain corn, but he gave a little bit back to the system. Sometimes I think, folks, this is what a soil health management system teaches us, that we got to give a little back once in a while. We can't be a mining operation. We can't take. We got to give a little bit. And so here's an opportunity to give a little bit and to continue to build our soil health system. Oh, I could spend 30 minutes on this guy. This is a guy that grows Timothy hay for the Japan export market. So first crop Timothy, they'll generally get 4 tons. He sells Timothy hay for $400 a ton on the export market. So one of our partners did a guarantee yield program with him that said, let's do some soil health cover crop on this Timothy field. And so what they did is, after first crop hay, he drilled in 100,000 corn seeds per acre on 60-inch rows. And then the last row of the planter, he's just experimenting with either pinto beans or forage peas. So he didn't have enough legumes to plant all the fields, but he just did the outside row of the planter box. Now, the bottom right picture, this row where the peas were planted next to the corn, doubled in that part of the field that we were looking at, doubled the corn production because it had a bigger nitrogen source. Where did the corn get the nitrogen from? I believe from mycorrhizal association. But we were really impressed with the field peas compared to the pinto beans, because the pinto beans are a warm season crop, and the first little frost that hit the corn also shut down the beans, but had no effect on those forage peas. So it was kind of an impressive system. So adding diversity, keeping the soil covered, grazing livestock. So at the end of the season, he brought in stocker cattle and fed these fields off with electric fences. This is nothing new, but it's new to Utah. The conservation district bought an interseeder. So when the corn's about 12, 14 inches tall, they plant a cover crop mix, 18 pounds to the acre. Here's a YouTube link if you want to watch the video of it. Here's, for the first time in Utah, we have a lot of corn silage. The majority of the corn in Utah is corn silage because our growing season is quite short. So here's the cover crop species, lots of turnips and radishes and annual ryegrass planted in the system. And so after harvest, which is pretty tough harvest of corn silage, the cover crop they let grow for a little bit, and then they'll come in and graze it. But look at the principles of soil health implemented here. Now the corn was not planted no-till, it was a conventionally tilled system. So you can kind of see how they're easing into it. It's honestly hard to get guys to do all 4 of these principles at the same time. But here they are implementing as many as they can.
Okay, so all these things taken into account, I wanted to leave everybody with just an example. And this is just an example. This is not the only way, but this is kind of using what we just talked about and some other things to put together a strategy that, there are logical first steps, second steps, and third steps that if we use what we just talked about and some of the soil's delivery of nutrients and understanding of carbon nitrogen ratios, we can come up with a logical and practical step-in approach. And so this is just one. There are others, but this is for corn bean country. And if we were going to put this together based on what we know, maybe the first operation would be get the drill or aerial seed cereal rye or annual ryegrass into those corn stalks. Okay, so that'd be step one, and that'd be a no-till operation. You'd want to immediately start focusing on your 4 management principles. So you want as little disturbance as possible to establish this cover crop. And so step one would be no-tilling cereal rye after corn. And after corn, why cereal rye and why after corn? Well, because there's a lot of success around being able to establish cereal rye after corn. Cereal rye is very cold tolerant, and sometimes corn harvest is later, and that gives us something that we can seed really late. If it comes off earlier, and if you're in a part of the country that you can benefit from annual ryegrass, especially if you've got frangipans and things like that, then maybe ryegrass is a really good option here too. It can be some other cereals as well. There's other cereals, but a cereal or a grass after corn, because what's our next crop? Our next crop in corn country and corn bean country is going to be soybeans. And so that's our first step. That's our first no-till operation. We're immediately getting living roots. We're planting something different, so we're adding to diversity, and we're going to keep the ground covered all winter long. Okay? So then our second step is we're going to terminate that cereal rye. And if it's a new person, I don't want it to be very big. I don't want to scare them to death. But so we would plan to plant, and terminate that cover crop, at shin to knee high and plant into it. However, if things turn wet in the spring of the year with soybeans into cereal rye, even in this picture to the right, there are beans coming up down underneath there that even in a situation if the cereal rye really gets away from us, it won't be a total train wreck. Soybeans still do really well even in this environment over here. So having soybeans as our second crop, and we're going to terminate that cereal rye at maybe plan on it at 12 inches your first time out. But then the next thing we're going to try to plant into that, of course, then is soybeans. So our second no-till operation is planting soybeans into that cover crop. And soybeans really do well in that, even the first year. We've already talked about kind of why, but if I could, some farmers plant different maturity group soybeans. So if it's in your system and you plant some early group beans, early group maturing beans, then plant them early into this cover crop. As far as if this is a system where you're transitioning over, I would plant an early bean early if that's part of your plan. And why am I saying that? I would like an early bean early. One, early group beans don't suffer as much yield drag into this environment where they're still going to have a cooler soil temperature and plenty of moisture during pollination and pod set than maybe if that same short season bean was planted into a conventional system. So there's less of a yield hit into this, but by planting an early bean early, what am I trying to achieve? What's my long-term strategy? I'm wanting a better window of opportunity to plant more diverse cover crops in the fall. Okay, so that's part of my overall. I'm always looking a season ahead in this situation to plan this strategy. So this becomes my second no-till operation. I've had continuous cover, continuous living roots all season long, and I'm really starting to feed the soil biology a better diet. And I should start seeing some improvements to the soil structure by this time, okay? So if all goes well and that soybean crop comes off maybe earlier, then maybe I've got an opportunity to plant a more diverse mixture of cover crops. And maybe I can plant something that gives me higher protein, higher nitrogen, a lower C to N ratio cover crop mix, because what's my next crop going to be? Well, I'm planning a season ahead because corn's going to be my next cover crop or my next cash crop. So I want this cover crop to be as strategically advantageous to my next crop as possible. So if it comes off, my soybeans come off in time, then my third no-till operation is a more diverse mix of cover crops. Now I'm really feeding soil biology a diverse mix. I'm keeping the soil covered, where otherwise if we just harvest those plain soybeans, it wouldn't take very long before we're back to bare soil again. So now we're going to keep the soil covered. So all of the aggregates are being protected. All of the biology's got a good habitat, so that it can flourish and start regenerating and rebuilding soil function for us. We get to see a situation like this. Maybe we can get more of a mix together. Even if we're using cereal rye, maybe we can get some peas and some brassicas and some other clovers mixed in there. And so, in a short period of time, then this is our third no-till operation, third different crop scenario, third different plant type that we're getting out there, or maybe more than 3 plant types. But 18 months into the system, we've had some time to get that soil function back, start to get that soil healing up, starting to build some soil aggregates over time, and the biology in the soil is really starting to work for us. The other thing that's happened is now back to our very first systems discussion on no-till. Now we've had a chance to, if we didn't have starter fertilizer on our planter, we've maybe had some time to do that. We've done a better job because we knew to do it with our harvesting system. We've maybe eliminated some compaction that would have otherwise been there. We've gotten, to go to some workshops where we can plan the system a little wiser. Okay? So we've had year-round cover, 3 no-till plantings, minimized disturbance. We've added diversity that was lacking, and we've had 2 winters of continuous living roots. So we've now had our 4 principles in place through this system in what otherwise would be a very non-diverse system. Corn soybeans is not very diverse and doesn't always provide a lot of ground cover. But just by adding these cover crops and strategically putting them in there, look what we've done, what we've been able to accomplish. So our very first corn year, which is corn in the Corn Belt, is what everybody focuses on. They don't want to see a reduction in corn yield. So this first year of corn, this first year of no-till corn, or maybe strip-till corn, is planted into a biologically active, high-functioning soil. It's already had a lot of healing that's happened through getting those 4 principles in place. So strategically, we've got a corn crop that we really shouldn't be seeing much yield drag or suffering, because we've had some time to get a lot of the things in place that soil really needed to provide the nutrients, provide its part of the resources to that corn crop in a timely fashion. Okay? So as we look at this system, now we've got a system in place that really shouldn't have had to have a lot of economic downturn. It should have had a lot of major soil function upturn and soil health upturn. And so this is a step-by-step process that helps us step in from a logical standpoint rather than hitting a train wreck and backing out of the system altogether. Now, of course, a lot of growers are going to want to go, maybe once they get ready, they're ready to go to that next level. Okay? And certainly now you're set up to do that. If we really start thinking about getting diversity out there, start adding a small grain to the rotation, maybe that gives us a better window of opportunity to plant cover crops even longer through the season, more diversity, more of a mix of cover crops that can be integrated. Okay, and so that's kind of that next level. And then there are other next levels. We can maybe think even further down the road. We've got a lot of high-end producers looking at maximizing diversity, maybe companion cropping. And then maybe if it's practical, then you can find a way to integrate even further diversify your system by getting some livestock out there. Let them help process that carbon. Let them provide another food source, many additional food sources for the biology in the soil and stimulate a really active biological system in the soil. So we can keep building on this system, but we wanted to show you that there was some fundamental logical steps to get into this system that is going to help that producer step in from a logical standpoint. If we plan this system, you know, from an understanding of the soil biology, from an understanding of how our equipment, from all the different components of the system, they all need to complement each other. And if we do a good job of putting that together, then we should be able to enjoy the real rewards of soil health, that resilience, that high productive capacity of our soils that are inherent to them. And so we should if we plan things correctly, we shouldn't expect a major economic downturn, you know, from just implementing a really sound soil health management system. Okay. So the take home, you know, agronomic efficiencies are going to be optimized. All that genetics, all that technology we've been blessed with over time, it will all be optimized when soil health is maximized, because when soil health is maximized, soil functions are at their highest level. Okay? To get those high functions, we have to manage for a living ecosystem. We have to understand the importance of all those microbes that live in the soil and do that job for us 365 days a year. If we're going to do that, then that's the key to optimizing productivity. So we can take production and conservation further with a management system that continually builds soil health. And that's how we're going to capture the potential of this system. All right, well, thanks for sitting through this. I know that was a lot to digest, but we wanted to kind of get you thinking systems early on in this discussion, early on in the course, because if you just think of the practices individually, then sometimes a practice by itself can never reach its full potential, and we certainly don't want it to antagonize the overall outcome. So be thinking systems. Always keep the 4 principles in the back of your mind as you're putting together your management plan and your operations.
Just in closing, cover crop, probably not my favorite cover crop picture, but probably cereal rye planted into grain corn, kind of a monoculture, but it's better than nothing, right? We can take production and conservation. Now, I'm not so worried about soil health drastically increasing yields, but what I'm after is conservation and return on investment for the producer. We can learn to capture that potential. And we know who the first soil health specialist was. It was Adam. He's trying to teach Eve that that's not a salad, that's my dirty underwear. So anyway, little contact information. I think we might have a minute or two for questions, Carl, if there's any.
Marla, I just wanted to start off with appreciate you joining us today and giving that presentation. One of the things I know, at least in discussions going through our soil health scenarios, talking about guys that are just starting into this new, obviously starting off small and giving it a try and kind of learning as they go, not to jump in completely with both feet, but kind of testing it out and kind of building it over time. I know you mentioned it's a journey, not a destination, so we've kind of taken that to heart. A lot of guys here have, we do have a few people that jumped in with both feet, but most guys started off small and have worked their way up over time. So just wanted to make that comment.
Yeah, that's a good comment, and I hope that come out in my presentation. I didn't want to just show hardcore soil health innovators that jump in with both feet, because that's not reality. Reality is only the innovators do that. The next step, and you'll see this as Candy presents the next presentation, these producers move in one step at a time. They're climbing the ladder one rung at a time for the most part of the producers. But it's really fun, and it's a little scary to work with these innovators when they jump in with both feet. Brad McIntyre sold his farming equipment. That's how he afforded to buy a sprayer and a no-till drill, as he sold $42,000 worth of farming equipment. So hope these were good examples. I have about 4 more hours of slides like this that talk about how guys are implementing soil health systems, but Carl would only give me an hour and 15 minutes. So
we don't have the land base and the livestock production here in Delaware. So I know it's not the thing you would start with and jump into, but how would you encourage guys where you are, even here, to add the animal component? Because I feel like that's missing for us.
Hey, I'm telling you what, in downtown production Idaho, our row crop guys, our corn, potatoes, sugar beet, onion, pinto bean guys, they have no livestock. We started in Idaho with a no livestock component. Only the ranchers have livestock. But what's interesting is when you do grow feed, the livestock guys come find you. At church, they say, hey, what are you doing with that 100 acres of cover crops or 20 acres of cover crops? Well, I'm looking for somebody to graze it off for me and make this a win-win operation. Now, that's what happened in Idaho. The first 3 or 4 years, the guys don't own their own cattle. They lease it out. If you grow the feed, what's that movie? If you build it, they will, what is it? If you build it, they will come. If you grow cover crops, you will find people that will graze it for you. And that's how we started it in Idaho, in a predominantly row crop agricultural system. So you just got to learn how to grow it, and they'll come. That's my advice. If you can't find cattle the first couple of years, just roll or crimp it. Well, whatever you do to terminate it and plant your crop, but it's a win-win system, in my opinion, when you start integrating livestock. It's a little tough because many of our producers don't have fences, right? It's a little scary, and you guys live in a little higher densely populated area than we do in the West. But still, we have farms with no fences, and McIntyre's made it work with a 2-wire electric fence. And these were wild cattle. These were cattle off the range. They never see humans except on a horse or getting loaded in a semi truck. So it can work. I didn't think it would work so good, but in my humble opinion, integration of livestock is the 5th principle of soil health. That always gets me in hot water with soil health division, but that's how I work.
All right. Yes. Thanks again, Marlon. We appreciate it.
You're welcome.